I never saw
Aaron, I don't know. He's not on thing.
So that's how I feel my
he's in and
mission a
out.
day. Like you can do the same one, right?
He shows up for the days. He shows up for the hard days, the days that we can really use the no questions. A day like today, we could probably survive. Okay, here we are. Not easy. It's just easier. Yeah, I would say
we
so.
gotta finish now.
Let's go. Okay, first, before we start, today's learning is being learned as a schos refuah shlema for Esther Sarah Bas Chaya Pesel, Dov Mordechai ben Beila Sheva, Elisheva Shena Bas Adina Edel, Hadar Sarah Bas Pesilea. I'll get there in a second. Lior Galia Bas Sarah Fegalea Bas Chana. Hold on, I have it here in a second. And Arya Yaakov ben Rus Tzipora, Yechiel Meir ben Bella. Also, today's learning is being learned as a schus for Yeshua Bekar for Shalom Chana Leah Bas Rachel Shalom ben Milka Rosa Gel Chana Bas Fegalea. And very importantly, today's learning is being learned. Lila Nishmas Rabbi Yitzchak Moshe ben Yeshua HaKohen, Rabbi Daniel Arya ben Yitzchak Moshe HaKohen, Rabbi Tzvi Avigdor ben Aaron Elazar, and Eva Shlomit Bas Chen. Their neshamas should have an aliyah. Today's, I wanted to say one quick ha'ara, just something I thought about this morning on my way to davening. So let's say, God forbid, you were in prison. God forbid a person was in prison and he knows that he's about to get out. Let's say, I don't know, 20 days from now, 30 days from now. He's been in prison for many, many years. And all of a sudden, the Shawshank, they stamp it. You're approved. We're going to let you out. Imagine the feeling you'd have between now and then. Like, you're getting out. Like, it's really just about being on your best behavior between now and then so you don't ruin it. And just imagine the excitement of the anticipation. In a certain sense, of course, the day you're out is the greatest day. But in a certain sense, the days between now and then are even better. The anticipation of the fact that you're going to be free is in and of itself sometimes even better. It's like it's like waiting for a vacation sometimes is even better than the vacation itself. There's a sadness that happens the moment the clock is ticking on the vacation. That doesn't happen when you're anticipating, right? There's an anticipation. So we're holding right now, what are we holding? The Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh. We're holding 2.5 weeks before 2 weeks before Pesach. We're holding 2 weeks before we're freed. I mean, that's really what's happening on Pesach. On Pesach, we're being freed from not just Mitzrayim, but our own Mitzrayim, our own limitations, our own personal worlds. And that's what, but that means you can't just walk in, you can't just wake up on the day when the jailer says, okay, you're free to go today. You know that it's coming. We know it's happening. So it's just an important thing, I think, for a person to take the next couple of weeks, just to, as much as possible, we're preparing with the food and the asher and the this and the seder and the karpas and the whatever. It's all very important, but to have a little bit of a pimius, to think about what's actually happening in 2 weeks. If you really believe in this stuff, and that's what we're doing here, right? That means in 2 weeks from now, we're going free on some level of our own personal Mitzrayim. Right? The Chassidish Svarim say Meitzarim. Mitzrayim comes from our own restrictions. So that means a person has to have an anticipation of that. There's a Gevaldik Simcha that comes to that. Okay. Either way, says the Gemara.
With that in mind, Rabbi Kevin is darshaning on Tuesday the 5th.
Oh, it's the 5th. Okay, good, because I thought it was the 4th.
And if it goes well, we'll do it in another week.
Yeah, okay.
Rabbi Kevin, myself, Rabbi Weissman, and Haggadah. Yeah.
Oh, when?
April 4th is Rabbi Krohn, April 5th is Rabbi Kevin, and myself. If it goes well, we can do it 2 weeks.
Yeah, sure. No, it's Tuesday. Wonderful day.
Tuesday.
We're doing halachos or just
No, easy Haggadah works. Nice, relaxing Haggadah.
So the children should ask. That's the answer to every question, right?
Right, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's the safe answer.
It's a safe answer.
Okay, so let's just quickly take a look at a pasuk before we read this very long Mishnah. The pasuk is in Yevamos, Parsha of Yevamos and Kiseitze. We say the following, right? So Kiyesh v'achim yachtav. That's the main pasuk. Kiyesh v'achim yachtav. Umeis echad mehem, and one of them die. Uben en loy, doesn't have a son. The wife, the surviving widow, shall not marry anyone else, but rather Yevama Yavayalel, the surviving brother, should do Yibam or Lakachal Elisha Yibma. We've seen this psukim many times already. The very next pasuk, the second pasuk in the Parsha of Yibam says, "V'hoya habichar asher teiled Yakum al shemoch v'ameis v'lo yimchish me b'Yisrael." Let us learn Chumash. How do you read this pasuk? V'hoya habichar. Let's teach it. Tell me. V'hoya, and it should be. And that the bechar. Who's the bechar? The firstborn. Who's the firstborn? Meaning, after Yibam is done, and they have a child. The child that's born is the bechar. That will be born. Yakum al Shem Achiv Hames shall establish a name for the brother, for the father who had died, for his uncle, right? Meaning, right? This now is the dead guy's brother's son shall establish a name. Yakum al Shem Achiv Hames so that the original person's name should not be erased. This is how we understand it. Everyone walks around levirate marriage. If you ask them, they open up a kiseitze, they open up a Deuteronomy, and this is what they find.
Deuteronomy.
Isn't that what Dvarim is? Deuteronomy?
Yeah.
Did I say it right? Yeah. I'm just trying to make the point that an Amoritz comes to the psukim and reads the psukim. This is how you would read it. There's no other way to read it. If you however, says the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, mitzvah begadol yabem. The mitzvah of Yibum is that after Shimon dies, you got a bunch of brothers, Reuven, Levi, Yehuda, whatever it is. Mitzvah begadol liyabem. The mitzvah is upon the older brother to do Yibum. V'im kadam hakatan zacha. But if one of the younger brothers went ahead and did the Yibum, even though we're saying here the mitzvah is with the older one, the younger one still has a mitzvah. So again, just to set that up, what are we saying? You have multiple brothers. Whoever was born first. If you were born first, it's your job to go. That's what the Mishnah is saying. It doesn't say anything about Bechar in the Mishnah. It just says mitzvah begadol. The gadol, the older one, has to do Yibum. If you're not the oldest, then someone else doesn't have the mitzvah. What does that mean? Does that mean they're not mitzvah? It means really what we're saying is lechatchila, the person who should do it is the older one. However, if one of the younger ones did it, it works. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan Abraisa. First of all, where do we know this halach in the Mishnah from? I just read a pasuk. The pasuk is nothing. It's not in that pasuk. Unless you find me another pasuk that tells me there's a reason why the older one should do yibum. I don't know why. Why is there a mitzvah by the older one? So Tana Rabbanan the Brisa. The Brisa is going to establish it.
It's probably in the Sifri.
Well, we're going to see a Brisa that's going to tell us exactly where it is.
I'm saying this Brisa probably is the Sifri.
Could be, yeah, it would make sense. Yeah, Sifri's on Deuteronomy, correct? Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa says the following: it's quoting the pasuk I just read, which I read it the way you and I would all read it if we were just opening up a chumash and reading it. If we opened up an art scroll, looked on the left, we would see what I just said. Yeah, I mean, I actually have no clue what it says there, but the pasuk says, and the bechar shall be. Zakta Gemara, mikan shemitzvah begadol yabim. If the words v'haya habechar mean the firstborn of the brother who does yibum, how do I see from there that the yibum that was already done should be done by the oldest brother? We're clearly understanding the word bechar here to mean eldest, and it's not talking about the son; it's actually talking about the son's father, and we're talking meaning the brother. The surviving brother must be the bechar, and we're saying the oldest brother does yibum, meaning the Brisa is saying, don't read the pasuk the way the pasuk is written. I'm telling you that there's an alternative understanding, that it's not to be read as Vahaya HaBechar and the son that will be born will establish the name of the deceased, but rather, after the man dies, his eldest brother shall go and do something that will then lead to him having his name continued.
I'm not saying it's a convoluted way. I'm saying the way the Mishnah's. I mean,
the Gemara is saying that the simple reading in the of the Chumash is incorrect. Meaning to take it out of its simple reading. The Brisa is saying this. The Mishnah really also, but the Tana Rabbanan and the Brisa.
So they're both correct.
Oh, so we'll see in the Gemara. We'll get a little bit further. We're going to see that this is the only place.
What? Were there two? What? Were two?
Slow down. Ein mikra yotzim midei pshuta. Let's define. Let's use definitions here. Ein mikra yotzim midei pshuta means Hashem gives us the Torah. That means every single word has understanding on a simple level, and then we can go and then say above that level there's a drasha. Maybe there's a remez, there's a sod, whatever it is. But you see, there's no such thing as a pasuk without a pshat. So we'll see in the Gemara in a little bit. Rava's opinion is that although that's true in Kol HaTorah Kula, every single word of Tanakh, or at least Torah, he says this pasuk is the only pasuk that the drasha tells us that the pshat in the pasuk is incorrect, that there is no read of this pasuk in its simple manner. The only way to understand this pasuk is the drasha. You with me? That Rav is going to say that. Okay, so that means there's two ways to read this pasuk. It could be talking about the child, or it could be talking about the brother. If it's talking about the child, then it's like we read it when we first opened the paper. The firstborn child of the brother who does the ibum, well, that child will be the name fulfillment of the.
I'm getting confused because the pasuk is not specifying the older brother. It's talking about the child that will be born. Am I getting?
You are right. The pasuk is absolutely talking about the child.
Right, but the Brisa is
telling you when you read that word. I'm telling you to not read it as if we're talking about the child, but rather to read it as if we're talking about the brother. Now, where did the Brisa get that? Not clear. We'll see in a moment, but At the outset, it's a little bit strange. So says the Brisa.
You could have said V'hoya Abein Asher Telei.
Oh yeah, Bein Asher Telei. So yeah, okay.
Extra word.
That's true. That's true, right? Meaning because obviously the first son would be a Bechar, unless the brother has a son. If the brother has a son from a previous marriage, then it wouldn't be, because he'll already have a Bechor. But okay, I mean that son of Balabat Shlav for sure could be Pshat.
It's not going to be the Gemara.
No, that's not. The Gemara is going to have
Whatever.
But
It's
I mean, his is more reasonable. I think the Gemara's is going to be more just take it on faith. Says the Gemara, Rabbi. What we're saying here is there's two ways to read this pasuk. The way I read it, V'haya Bechar, the way most people would read it if they're making Shnai Mikra V'Chatargim, they read the pasuk, they think it's talking about the child. V'haya Bechar, who's the Bechar? The firstborn son of Reuven, when he does Yibum and has a baby with the widow, that child, that Bechar, is going to be the establishment of the name of the father, the uncle with him. But says the Brisa, from here I see the fact that it's telling me that someone is a Bechar, it's telling me that the brother is a Bechar. Meaning, and Bechar does not mean the Bechar, like the Pishnayim Bechar, it just means older. That's how the Gemara, the Brisa understands it, which means the Brisa understands the pasuk is to be read as follows: V'haya ha-Bechar, and let it be that the eldest brother, Asher Teilad Yakum al Shem Achiv, that when he has Yibum with the woman who provides him with a baby, that child will then be Yakum al Shem Achiv, which is very, very much not the pshat in the pasuk if you read it simple. Says the Gemara, not only that, Asher Teilad, the continuation of the pasuk tells me Pratla Eilanis, She'en Yoledis. This is all stuff we saw before. Meaning, the moment we change the pshat in this pasuk, we have drushes now. Meaning, if you read the pshat in the pasuk, none of these drushes exist. Because if the pshat in the pasuk is we're talking about the child, then every single word here is needed for its own purpose to teach me that the son takes the place of his uncle, right? Al Shem Achiv. So it's only once you tell me that V'haya ha-Bechar is going on the brother, and now telling me that he's the eldest. Well, now all of a sudden the rest of this pasuk doesn't make sense. How are you going to read this pasuk? So now I say Asher Teiled is Prat La'Eilanis, She'en Yoledes, Yakum al Shem Achiv is also Lenachla. The Nachla meaning to say there's a halacha that the person who does Yibum, not only is he married now to the widow, but he inherits whatever assets the dead brother had. Meaning, normally the halacha is when someone dies, all of their stuff goes to their kids. Now, clearly, if we're talking about a Yevamos case, there's no kids. So who else does it go to? It goes to his father next. After it goes to his father, if his father's not around, then it gets split up amongst his brothers. So what we're saying over here is that if a person does Yibum in such a situation, he jumps to the head of the line. And not only does he jump to the head of the line, the brothers get nothing. It's all his. So there's a financial incentive to doing Yibum, not just, hey, I like Rachel, right? Meaning there's an incentive to doing Yibum with Rachel because I get to now have all my brother's assets. So, says the Gemara, Yakum al Shem Achiv teaches us, Lenachla, that he gets all of those assets. Says the Gemara Weiler, 1 second, how do you know that that's true? Ata oimer Lenachla eina elo l'shem. Maybe, now the Gemara finally opens its mouth and says, maybe you're reading this entire pasuk incorrectly. You're reading this pasuk to say, V'haya ha-Bechar asher teilad Yakum al Shem Achiv is talking about the brother being eldest, and therefore all of these other words are teaching me Nachla and Eilanis. Says the Gemara, maybe it means V'haya ha-Bechar is going on the child, that the firstborn son, like we kept on saying earlier, Asher Tela, that will be born, Yakum al Shem Achiv Ames, is there to establish a name for his uncle. And what will it mean? Says the Gemara, Elo l'shem, meaning Yosef. Let's say the guy who died, his name was Joe. Karunoso Yosef, we call him Joe. The kid, we call the kid Yosef al Shem, the father who died. Nice, right? Yeah. Yochanan Karunoso Yochanan. We pick these names, whatever they are. We'll name him after the person who died. Maybe that's what it means. In Lo'ilam, you don't have any of these drushes available to you in this pasuk. So the Gemara says, no, it's Gzeira Shava. And this Gzeira Shava is what's going to be the impetus for understanding the pasuk out of the normal pasuk pshat. Says the Gemara, Nemar Khan, it says by us Yakum al Shem Achiv, V'Nemar Lahalon, and by Bnei Yosef, by the other children beyond Ephraim and Menashe. When Yaakov is speaking to Yosef, he tells Yosef, listen, your two kids, Ephraim and Menashe, they are going to be shvatim. They are going to get a chelik in Eretz Yisrael as a shevet. Your sons that come after Ephraim and Menashe will not be. They will have to get a portion in the field, in the land of Ephraim and Menashe. So what did he say? Al shem achayim yikaru benachalosam. They will get their portion in the land through their existent brothers Ephraim and Menashe. So it says shem. Ma shem ha'omer lahala nachla. Just like the parsha talking about Yosef's kids is talking about inheritance, so too av shem ha'omer kan by Yevamos lenachla. Therefore, it must be that lo yakum al shem achav is talking about teaching me the halacha of nachla. That gzeira shava now tells me we're not talking about the son anymore. We're clearly talking about the brother, because the shame teaches me that. Well, if the shame teaches me we're talking about the brother, that must mean the whole pasuk's talking about the brother. Therefore, bechar means the eldest brother, not the oldest child.
Why does the shame teach us the
Again, shame, one parsha by gzeira shava, I have the same word here, the same word there. So since I have the same word here and the same word there, that is a special drasha that tells me that I can apply laws from there to over here. And since the discussing by Yosef, his children, is talking about inheritance, I assume over here we're talking about inheritance. And if we're talking about inheritance over here, we can only be talking about the brother and that fact that he inherits. Now the Rishonim ask me, why not? Why not just say it's talking about the son? And we're telling me that the son inherits. Okay, it's a discussion for the Rishonim. We're not going to go into that. But either way, says the Gemara, says the Brisa, from this gzeira shava, I have to turn the pashup shot in this pasuk on its head to say that it's talking about the brother and not the son. Rabbi, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
100%? Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, I can wait. Sorry, I don't want you.
Don't wait.
No, I'd rather wait because I want to make sure we're all learning together.
I got it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The pasuk then continues and says that his name should not be erased. Well, now once we're talking about the brother, what are we saying? We're saying that the person who died and his brother who are doing yibum, it must also be prat l'sris. If the person who died was a sris, what's a sris? A sris is a person who doesn't have either beitzim or an aver, meaning he was born that way. In this context, is what it means. Meaning he was born where he has a medical mal problem, whatever he's got a medical malfunction, but something that he's born that way. You're right. Meaning either he's missing something or it doesn't work.
He's missing everything. Is he a Kendall?
No, that's something else. A eunuch might be the good English word for it, but typically a eunuch is a man-made. Usually there's no such thing as being born a eunuch. And here we're specifically talking about a God-made eunuch. So we're talking here about where a person is.
Also legit, that's nothing.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean, so again,
It says he's missing.
in many different areas, there's many different areas where man-made or God-made matters. Sometimes the isser,
I'm not sure whether
the isser to marry into such a person is only when it's man-made. And here we're talking about the mitzvah of yibum, and we're saying that's only when it's God-made.
Right.
Meaning you can't take the yibum mitzvah away by doing the surgery.
The bottom line is they can't have a kid. That's the bottom
That's
line.
the key here.
It's like a man counterpart of an islandist.
Yes, it's exactly right. In this context, that's what it is. So either way, so that's the breast. So sheshmai machui. Now, meaning, so let's just clarify that. Why is he pater from yibum? Meaning, why is the brother of such a person pater from yibum? If the whole svara behind why the brother's doing yibum is in order to continue the name of the dead guy, well, the dead guy in his own life was never going to have a name because he couldn't have kids. So since he himself couldn't have kids, when he dies, therefore the brother has no responsibility. So it's not just like midrabanan, we say don't do it. Min HaTorah, it's as if the same way an islandist is someone who's not going to be able to help the brother have a child, so too the one who died wouldn't have had it. Now, separately, let's say the Yavam was a sris. We're not discussing that here, but let's say the Yavam was a sris. He's also pater. That's a different discussion, different drasha. But here we're discussing the.
How does this male islandist fit into this whole discussion?
We're dashing the pasuk. We have one pasuk here. We're trying to understand what the pasuk teaches us. If the pasuk is talking about the son, all it's teaching us is that the son takes over for his uncle. If the pasuk's talking about the yavam, then all of a sudden I have all of these drashas available to me. The first one is that the yavam should be the oldest. The second one is he can't have an islandist. The third one is that the yavam gets his yerusha, and the fourth one is that the brother who died can't be someone who wouldn't have had the ability to have kids, because if that's the case, then there's no reason to be concerned about continuing his house. His house would have never been continued.
Why do we care? We already said a couple of the 90 years old, and
yes. The distinction is between whether there's a mitzvah on the person or not, and the mitzvah is spoken to only someone who is inherently completely not part of the world of having a child. Meaning, let's say someone goes ahead and castrates himself, he still has chiv and dies, there's still a mitzvah yibum. Meaning, it's only because he was born as someone who was completely taken out of the world of not having the ability to have a child. There's a distinction there.
Well, it's questionable whether he could do yibum, given that yibum is bia.
So if we're talking about a sris where it's a missing aver, then yeah, correct. If we're talking about a sris that it's a, let's say, a beitzim problem, then maybe not. Okay. Amarav. And by the way, even so, you could say that even then he would have a din chalitza, let's say,
right?
Or pashtus. Yeah. Okay, so says the Gemara. So we have this Bryce. The Bryce just took the pshat of the Pashup shot of this pasuk and completely turned it on his head. Amarava. This is the only place that happened. Afal gav de bechol hatayra kula ein mikra yotzim midei pshuto. We don't ever take and disregard the Pashup shot in the pasuk. Even if you have drashas, the drashas are always on top of the Pashup shot. The Pashup read here. Hacha asoy gzeira shava. This gzeira shava of shame, which turned this entire pasuk on its head. Afikte mi pashte legamri. This is the only pasuk in the Torah that if you pointed to it and said, "Hey, read it," the words you're reading are just not true. The only way to read it is in a derech hadrush. So says Rava, the Gzeira Shava teaches that.
We have others. We have others that you could have said this.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Several.
Yeah, maybe the whole pasuk. Maybe we're saying Ayin Tachas Ayin is only a part of the pasuk.
Okay.
Either way, the Ilav Gzeira Shava. The Gemara asked the following question: If Ilav Gzeira Shava, had it not been for this Gzeira Shava, what would you have said? Havi Amina shame mamish. You're telling me that the Pashup shot would have been understood to mean that we're talking about the son, and the son is the one the Torah is telling you, the son that will be born has to establish the name of your father's brother. Leman kimizar Rahman. If we're talking about the son, how do you read the pasuk? It's just a grammar question here. Leman kimizar Rahman. Is it talking to the Yavam? V'haya habechar asher teilad Yakum al shem achiv. That doesn't make sense. It should be Yakum al shem achicha mibayil. If we're talking to the Yavam, so if I'm talking to you, I don't say you should go on his brother. I say you should go on your brother.
But part of the problem is the word teled has two meanings. It can mean that she gives birth to,
Correct.
or that you
Correct.
give birth
Yeah.
to.
And I'm learning that now as I teach my kid in school, and he's in first grade, and every time I check his homework, I realize Taylor could mean you, and it could mean her.
When we switch
correct. That's true. That is true.
You, and that's why achicha. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, correct. Okay. And lebeidina, and if it's talking to Bezdin, meaning again, the Gemara's assumption is that the pshat and the pasuk would mean that we're talking that the child has to be named Yosef or Yochanan, then either the uncle's doing it, right? That the brother who's surviving, or Bezdin's going to force the brother to do it. So then that means the pasuk is now speaking to Bezdin. So what is it saying? Achiv doesn't make sense. It should be Yokum al Shem Achi Aviv Mi Bayale. It's speaking to Bezdin and saying, make sure that the brother of the brother of the boy's father does his job and names him after the father who died. So if it's Yosef, Yochanan. So the Gemara is bothered by the grammar. Well, not grammar, a little bit the grammar. Like it's using the wrong pronouns. I hate to say that, but it's using the wrong pronouns. Achicha is a problem, and achiv is a problem. It should be achi aviv.
Pronoun existed before the.
Yes, correct. Yeah. The Dilma hachi kamar lo Rachmana. The Gemara says no. Dilma hachi kamar hu Rachmana lebezdin. No, I could have read the pasuk. Meaning again, what's this question asking really? We're not just asking a grammar question. We're pointing out that you're telling me I needed a Gzeira Shava to teach me that we're talking about Nachla. You don't need a Gzeira Shava for that. It can only be talking about Nachla. It cannot possibly be talking about this halacha of you have to name after the father who died. Because if that's the case, how do you read the pasuk? The pasuk doesn't fit. It must be talking about the way we said. It must be talking about Yokum al Shem Achiv is talking about the Yavam himself having the mitzvah. He's the Bechar, and he's the one who has the mitzvah to be making Shem Achiv his brother. So the Gemara says no. There is a way to have read the pasuk where it's talking about the mitzvah of naming, let's say, and the way you read it is as follows: Omru leili Yavam Bezdin, tell the Yavam Yokum al Shem Achiv that his son should be named after Echav, his brother. That's the way you would read the pasuk, and therefore that's the pasuk without the Gzeira Shava. With the Gzeira Shava, we say not like that. No, it's talking about the Yavam, and therefore Nachla, and therefore Bechar is talking about the Yavam, and the whole pasuk is not talking about the son. In which case, then there would be no mitzvah to name, and which, by the way, is the halacha. There is absolutely no mitzvah. It might be a nice Indian, whatever, but there's absolutely no mitzvah to name the son after the dead father, the dead uncle. In fact, the Ramban proves on Chumash, he proves that from the fact that the Gemara comes off of this, that really the understanding of Yokum al Shem Achiv has nothing to do with the kids. We were talking about this the other day. The Ramban is a Shittas Yachid, but he says that the whole concept of Yibum, of talking about establishing the home, is actually the Ma'aseh Bia itself. That in and of itself is called Hakamas Shem. Don't ask me how. I don't have a good, real handle on it, because to me it goes against everything that, I don't know, I've sort of always thought, but it's a very interesting opinion. It actually helps out in a lot of areas in the Masechta, because once you realize that it's not about that, it makes things a little bit easier. But anyway, says the Gemara Vayta. So Ella also Gzeir Shava afikta legamre. So so says Rava. So you see over here the Gzeir Shava is taking it out of the pshat. In which case, then we're talking about Yavam, we're talking about Yerusha. Says the Gemara. 1 second. We have a pasuk. The pasuk says V'haya Bechar, and you're telling me that we're talking about the brother. Wonderful. And it says in the Mishnah that that means it's the mitzvah for the oldest one to do the. Let me ask a simple balabatish question. Why does it say Bechar in the Torah? Why not just say Gadol? It's a simple question. The Gemara is not going to actually ask it here. It's going to reference it a little bit later. But I'm just pointing out the backdrop of the following little bit of a Gemara. If the whole point of HaBechar is to teach me that the oldest brother does it, why use the word Bechar? It's a very tricky language. Bechar, it's a language that has baggage. Pishnai and Bechar, it implies that the Yavam is a Bechar. But we're seeing in the Mishnah, what if the Bechar is dead? Are you telling me that let's say Ruvain, the one who died, Shimon, the one who died, was the Bechar? There's no Bechar left. Are you telling me now there's no mitzvah? No, of course there is. It's whoever's the oldest one left, it's his mitzvah. So why use this confusing lashon of Bechar? Yeah. So the backdrop of this following Gemara is sort of that question. The Gemara is trying to address why did it choose to tell us Bechar? Must be there's some meaning in that. The Gemara is going to try to see what it is. Hashda the Amris Kra begadol ksiv. So you have established we're not talking about the child, we're talking about the gadol. Ema Bechar liyabeim, Pashat loy liyabeim. Maybe what it's teaching me is Gufa. Very simple. Pashat Pshat. Remember, this is going to come up again and again throughout the Masechta. We've established through Hakdamos, throughout the intros of all of the Masechta, all of the stuff that's going to come up throughout. But now we're coming to the Gemaras that are addressing those issues. So I've said in the past, every brother has a mitzvah of Yibum. It took us a while to wrap that out. Okay, but this is where the Gemara actually establishes that. It says the Gemara, who says all the brothers have a mitzvah of Yibum? Maybe Itaka means V'haya Bechar, specifically the eldest brother. But a Pashat, meaning a non-eldest brother, does not have the mitzvah. Gemara says no. Very lumdish answer. Im Kain, Eishes Achiv Shalei Hayu Ba'Yolamu Demiyat Rahman Alamali.
No, he's not a Bechar.
Meaning, what is it? Eishes Achiv Shalei Hayu Ba'Yolamu. It's when a son is born last. He's born later, and he never met his eldest brother. Which means, by definition, we're talking about who?
Not a Bechar.
Not a Bechar, and yet we're still saying the Torah has to tell me he's Pater from Yibum. Why? Isn't he Pater just because he's not the Bechar? The answer is no, that's not enough. Of course you're going to have a mitzvah Yibum if you're not a Bechar, because mitzvah's to everyone. Let me repeat this to make sure everyone has this. Yeah? What we're saying is a very simple thing. Remember, Eishes Achshel Ha'ba'alamu is the case. You have two brothers, Ashba, you have two brothers, and one of them dies and leaves over a wife. And now, after the first brother died, a third brother is born. And the question now is let's say the second brother does Yibum, and now he dies. And so now that wife is falling to this case, to the Levi, the brother born later. Well, if you're going to tell me that Yibum is only a mitzvah if you're the eldest, well, by definition, this guy doesn't have a mitzvah Yibum. He's the third youngest, right? Third oldest, whatever. Yeah, he's the youngest boy.
Is he the only one that's available? To do
Doesn't matter. I mean, if what we're saying is the mitzvah is only to the oldest, which is the Gemara's suggestion, I wouldn't need a pasuk to tell me he's pater because of Eishes Achshel. He's pater because he's the youngest. He's not the oldest. Finished. So says the Gemara, very, very, very simple and a good cheshbon. So the Gemara says, fine. Parach Ravacha. Okay, I have another explanation again, coming back to the word Bechar, why I chose it. Ve'ema lemeute buchra di'ima, meaning maybe la'olam you could tell me that the pasuk teaching me Eishes Achshel Ba'Yolama was needed. You're right, not to teach me that if he's not the oldest of the father's kids, but maybe what the Torah is meaning to say is the mitzvah Sibim only applies to someone who can be called a Bechar. You're right. He's clearly not the Bechar of his father because he's the third brother in his father's family. But maybe the two brothers that he shares with his father, those are with two other ladies, and his father remarried another lady or has a second wife, and he's the firstborn of her. Wow. So at least on some level, he's still a Bechar. He's her firstborn, and maybe the Torah is saying that such a person would have a mitzvah, but if he's not a Bechar from that woman, he wouldn't. And the Torah needed a pasuk of Eishes Achshel Ha'ba'Yolama to teach me in that case that he's not chayiv. Why? Not because of the Bechar problem, because he's a Bechar. From the separate problem of Eishes Achshel Ha'ba'Yolama, in which case it makes a lot of sense. Gemara says no. Hahulei motzes hamras. You can't say such a thing. Why? The Yibum benachla tala rachmana, because Yibum is clearly a nachla question, not even from this pasuk, from other pasukim which we've seen in other places. Therefore, v'nachla min av lo min em, and we know Yerusha only comes through the father. We don't care about Yerusha through the mother, and so therefore, clearly, the fact that he's called a Bechar from his mother's side, at least as it pertains to this halacha, is completely irrelevant. So clearly, if the Torah is going to require a pasuk to tell me it must be that all brothers, not just the Bechar, but all brothers are going to have a mitzvah sibum. Ask the Gemara, okay, I have another way to explain the word Bechar that's not kifi the way the Mishnah tells us. Maybe you're right. All brothers have a mitzvah to do yibum, but only when a Bechar exists. When there's a Bechor alive in the world, you have a bunch of brothers. The Bechor, let's call him Ruvain, he's still alive. Now, all of them have a mitzvah. But let's say the Bechor got into a car accident, he's no longer around, and now the rest of the brothers are dealing with a Yibum situation where Levi, Reuven, Shimon dies, let's say. Shimon dies. Does Levi have a mitzvah Yibum? No. Why? Because his brother Reuven's dead. Meaning, I might think that's what the Torah is telling me by using the word Bechar. It's telling me, V'haya ha-Bechar asher teila. Meaning, as long as the Bechar exists, then one of the brothers has to do Yibum. But if the Bechar doesn't exist, says the Gemara.
Let's use that.
Yeah, so says the Gemara, no. Because Amar Kro, the pasuk says, "Umeis echad mehem." Right, if you go to the pasuk before it, right, Ki yeshvu achim yachdav. When you have two brothers who are living together at the same time, Umeis echad mehem, and one of them dies. Says the Gemara, Milo yaskinon demeis bechar. Who dies first? Typically, it's the older brother that dies first. Again, it can happen the other way around. Heart attacks, car accidents. But generally speaking, the normal course of events, the older people die first and the younger people die second. So what does it say in the Torah? Ki yeshvu achim yachdav. I got two brothers. Umeis echad mehem, and one of them dies. Who's dying? I got to assume it's the older one. So says the Gemara, since we're talking about the older one dying, clearly that, and yet still we're saying that the younger one has a din mitzvah sibum. Why? The Bechar is dead. Teretz is, we don't care that the Bechar is alive or dead. That's what the Gemara says. So you see clearly, right? You understand? I mean, the Gemara is saying that's an answer. Says the Gemara, maybe not. Maybe you say the other way around. Who says the older brother has to be the one dying? Meaning to say, it just says there are two brothers who were alive at the same time and one of them died. You're right. Logic says it should be the older one, but it's not muchach. Could be that it's the younger one who died first. In which case, then the Torah is saying the mitzvah yibum is only when there's actually an existent bechar. In which case, we can revive this pshat. And la'olam, it's not the way the Mishnah says it. Where it says no. Ha miyat rachmana eshesach shel ha'bayilama. This pasuk itself is the pasuk, right? Ki yeshu achim yachtav. This pasuk is where we learn out eshesach shel ha'bayilama, which is clearly talking about where the older one died, right? Because we're talking about the younger brother being born later, and we're saying that in such a context, he has no mitzvah, which means this pasuk is talking about two brothers that the oldest brother died first, and yet still, I need a pasuk to tell me eshesach shel ha'bayilama. Why? Teretz is because the younger brother would have a mitzvah yibum if not for that. So says the Gemara, therefore, it's got to be talking about the older brother died. So you see that even though there's no bechar, there is a mitzvah yibum. So Mar says another pshat. Ve'ema kileka bechar kadam katan zachav yiika bechar kadam katan d'lei zacha. So it's like we're forcing the Gemara inch by inch into the real pshat. Says the Gemara, but I could still say something by bechar. What is it saying? Bechar tells me that there's a maila in the older. But who says that the maila in the older applies all the time? Maybe we'll say that when you have a bechar alive, that's when we say that if the katan goes ahead and does yibum, he has a mitzvah. Sorry, thank you. When there's no bechar, who's the more chashav brother to do the mitzvah, that's when we disperse the mitzvah amongst the rest of the brothers. The bechar, but if there's a bechar, then his presence outshines everyone, and it's as if we would then say katan leizacha, that the katan, meaning the younger brothers, wouldn't have a mitzvah. Mar says no. Amar kra ki yeshu achim yachtav, which, by the way, is just the simple pshat is you have brothers who are alive at the same time. Huksha yeshivas achim zelazeh. Since there's a hekesh in the pasuk ki yeshu achim yachtav, meaning they're all together, we treat all the brothers the same. Now this drasha that we just brought here, it seems like the more general klaliistic drasha that I think would knock out most, if not all, of the questions we had asked. Really, what this is basically saying, no, they're all the same. Meaning, now you might ask, okay, so then why is there a mitzvah begadol? We'll have to work that out. But this hekesh is basically saying all the brothers are the same. It says the Gemara, ve'ema ki ika bechar. No, I still have a pshat. You're right, they're all the same, but Lamaisa, I have to address the fact that the Torah uses the word bechar. Ve'ema ki ika bechar lehadar agadol, ki leka bechar ein chozur neitzel gadol. This is talking about the halacha of being kofa, of forcing the oldest brother. So let's say you have a bunch of brothers, and the woman who's surviving is not, let's say, the prettiest. The estate of the guy who died ain't that great, and no one really wants to deal with this. No one wants to give him. No one could be bothered to do chalitza, and so therefore no one's doing it. So the halacha is just for our own edification is we do force the brother to do it. Which brother? The oldest. Meaning we do force him to at least to go do chalitza. Bezdin will be kai for him. They force him in their own way of getting him to do it. Says the Gemara, maybe what it means by Bechar is that when you have a Bechar, then we force the oldest to go ahead and do the Chalitza. But if there's no Bechar, Ein Chayzun Eitzel Gadol, meaning we don't necessarily choose the Gadol to force him to do it. We'll just grab any brother and force him to do it. But then the Gemara says that can't be because I have a first Bryce and not like that. Alama Tanya Abaye Kishisha. Why did Abaye Kishisha teach the following? Mitzvah begadol yabem loy ratza, and if he didn't want to do it, holchem etzel achav hakatan. And here it's Rashi speaks out hakatan here in context does not mean the youngest. It means hakatan mimenu, hakatan from him. He just go meaning basically the way the Bryce is understood is if the first one's not around, go to the second. If the second one's not around, go to the third. So clearly. There is still a concept that even after the Bechar is gone, or the Bechar doesn't want to do it, we're still going to go ahead and force the second youngest, second oldest, third oldest.
Our Mishnah instead of a Bayek.
Correct. Yeah. Loy Ratza, Choser Neitzel Gadol. So you see clearly we go in order of oldest, no matter what. So the Gemara finally says, Ki Bechar. Adarabba. We're going to use the word of Bechar to teach us, Ki Bechar, Ma Bechar, Bechuraso Garmalo, Af Gadol Gedulasa Garmalo. Meaning to say, that will always go by order of who's eldest. I believe this is the last question from the pasuk of Bechar.
And that's what we pass them. You always go to the next one.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of who has the mitzvah and in terms of who we're kaifa, that does not mean that everyone is potter. I mean, everyone has a mitzvah, and if the youngest went ahead and jumped the gun, the young jumps the gun. Maybe say the last ditch effort here to say Bechar. What does it mean? When the Bechar does Yibum, he takes the Nachla. But when the Bechar is not the one doing Yibum, maybe then we say the Nachla is split normally. Says the Gemara, no, Amar Kro, Yaakov al Shem Achiv. The pasuk just simply says he shall be established in the name of the brother, the Harekam. And in the end of the day, there's no difference between whether it's this type of brother or that type of brother. So therefore, we're left saying that there's really no difference. So now we have to ask ourselves, okay, so our Mishnah does say that it does say Bechar. Bechar teaches me eldest. But if that's the case, then just say eldest. Ve'ela Bechar the Karya Rachmana L'mai Helchasa. Just say Gadol, right? Just say older brother. If you say older brother, we learn everything we need to know and everything's good. Says the Gemara, you're right. L'greyasa. It's there to teach me a unique halacha in the opposite direction. It's coming to limit the nature of the Yerusha of the brother who does the Yibum. Meaning, what did we say before? We said that the brother who does Yibum gets to keep the estate. So just in quick primer in Hilchos Yerusha, there are two types of assets, at least as it comes to Yerusha. There's the things the guy has already, and there are those things that he has to go ahead and sell to get, or he has to go be tovea someone in din. So let's say I lent you money, not me. Let's say someone lends you money, and then he dies. So right now, technically, what's the asset he has? He has a note. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have the gold. He doesn't have all he has is a piece of paper that says you owe him money. Well, does the son get that? In a typical Yerusha, of course the son gets that. Meaning a son can go take that shtar, go into Bezdin and take the money out from Kalman, because now Kalman owes him the money. But a Bechar has a special halacha. A Bechar gets two chalakim in his father's estate. The two chalakim that he gets, it's called Pishnayim, he doesn't get to take that from the assets that are coming after he dies. He only gets to take that from whatever was physically in existence by the father before he died. So the fact that the father had a lot of outstanding debtors who owed him money is irrelevant. That's going to get split amongst all the brothers equally. The only thing that the Bechar gets double of is he had this gold, he had that wheat, he had that land, that stuff he gets to say he had that. And that stuff he gets to split. Land might be different, but yeah, that's the general rule. So now, 1 second, let's just read the Gemara. So what are we saying here? What we're saying is that just like a Bechar has that halacha, the Yevamos has the same halacha. That's the chiddush of the Gemara, the pasuk. By calling him a Bechar, we're saying that the Yerusha that he gets of his brother's estate applies very similar to the way that a Bechar would be, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. What is a Yevam really? A Yevam is just another brother. So that means, let's say this guy dies and he has no kids, obviously. Let's say his father's dead. So what would happen? We would split up amongst the brothers. So what we're saying is that this Yavam gets Pishnayim. I mean, he's effectively getting a double portion, because let's say, I mean, just theoretically speaking, Shimon dies and Reuven's his brother yarshining him. So let's say there's no other brothers, he gets everything anyways. But let's say there are other brothers, he would split the Yerusha with the other brothers. What we're saying now is he doesn't split it, he gets to keep everything. So in a certain sense, he's like a Bechar, getting really more than he should. That's what the Gemara means to say, that this Yavam is like a Bechar, Let's just read it inside. He doesn't take the future assets the same way he takes from the stuff that already exists physically. Af high, so too this yavam eino notel beroy ki b'muchsa. New Mishnah, but before we do, any questions?
No.
This is way off scope, but
So then no. Okay, Victor says the Mishnah.
This is easy.
I just want to.
Yeah, it's not a comment.
I just
No.
want
A normal
I-
yeah,
regular
yeah.
Gemara.
I just want to bring it up that a certificate of indebtedness, which we mentioned, has a different halacha. So then you have to study treasury bonds, which are
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
certificates of
That's why I
government.
mentioned land. Land's another example.
Yeah.
You can't physically hold land. You can only prove that you have a right to it, either with a star or whatever it is.
But a treasury bond is easily collectible.
Yes, yes.
I'm so confused. Who's talking about the father or you're saying just like before, he's getting all the assets of the brother.
So the
Not-
Yavam does not get all of the
Not
assets.
like only
He's saying he
liquid.
doesn't get all the assets.
I mean, it's not completely accurate, but that's a good
Right.
way to think of it. The liquid assets that are owned by the dead brother,
He's saying
that he
he
keeps.
doesn't get the promissory note.
none. Yeah. Meaning he does get it
A share.
as a regular
Doesn't
brother.
get
A
preference.
share.
I noticed that we're in
Take the estate of the dead guy, split the properties, the things that he owns into liquid assets versus non-liquid assets.
So he gets all the liquid
All the
assets.
liquid assets.
All the liquid assets, only the promissory notes.
That would be split amongst the
So
brothers,
the other brothers only get promissory notes.
Yeah.
That's all they get. Okay.
unless
fine.
he dies, and then
Right.
and
Okay.
then
right.
then this
Then
and he has no kids, and you know.
I see. Okay.
Okay, new Mishnah. This Mishnah is going to touch on a topic that's going to take us well into Chafei, but we're going to start it and we're going to have fun with it. This is talking about a person who is maybe a little bit of a shady character. He maybe likes to hang out with ladies, and he shouldn't be hanging out with ladies. There's rumors about him that he flirts a little too much. Says the Mishnah, Haniton al hashifcha. Let's say you have a Jewish guy, and a rumor goes out about him. People are saying that he slept with this lady. Now, there's no proof, but you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. We have to know in halacha how to deal with such a thing. How do we deal with a rumor in halacha? It's a big discussion. You know, in Hilchos Lashon Hara, there's questions in business. How much are you allowed to believe? How much you're not allowed to believe? Or you have a mitzvah to be mefarsim it? What status does a person have once a rumor is believed? You know, a kol. When a kol, we talk about a voice, a rumor about someone. Haniton ala shivcha. Vinishtachara, and now she becomes Jewish, right? The shivcha k'nainis, when she's freed, she shouldn't be, but when she's freed, that's a giyaris. She's basically a Jew now. So now you're allowed to marry her. Now, should you marry her? Meaning, she's a woman who everyone has been talking about. That I heard this guy, Joe, is sleeping around with this guy, and all of a sudden she becomes a Jew, and guess what? They got married. This confirms the rumor, it seems. This is what's happening over here. It seems as if the rumor, which until now maybe we had no right to believe, this is a little bit like confirmation. Unless it's what? Like it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, they're saying it, I might as well marry her. I mean, the pashtus is that he's marrying the lady he once was with. Says the Mishnah Weiler, alavodas kachavim, or if it's a regular goyish woman, not just a shifcha. Vinis gaira, and this avodas kachavim becomes a Jew. Harei lo yichnas, he shouldn't marry her. Why? For obvious reasons, in order to not confirm the rumor. We'll see in the Gemara, a pasuk midrabon on why it's a thing. However, v'im kanas, if let's say he married her, then ein moitziyah miyada, we don't force him to get divorced, because at best or at worst, this is only some type of an issa derabanan, or maybe not even an issa derabanan, maybe it's only like an Inyan toiv not to do. Haniton aleishes ish, however, let's say we're not talking now about a goyish, we're talking about a Jewish woman, and the Jewish woman we're talking about was married, which would then mean that if she had any children, we'd have a question about those children. We'd have to be discussing whether she's even allowed to be with him. There's a special halacha. If a woman cheats on her husband, while she's married, and the halacha is,
You can't go back.
not only is she not allowed to be with the husband, she's not allowed to be with the person who she cheated with. And if we have Eidim that Reuven and Rachel are married, and Rachel goes and cheats on Reuven with Shimon, so the halacha is she's also to Reuven, her husband, once we prove that she's cheated, but she's also to be with Shimon. It's an Isser Labal and an Isser Laboil. It's a big discussion, yeah? But this is Pashut. Everyone's asking. This is Mefurish in the Torah. The Mefurish in the Gemara, Psukim, we darshan, that she's usher to the Baal and she's usher to the Baal. 3 nafkaminas of nus like this. 1, she's usher to the Baal. 2, she's usher to the Baal, and she's a Zaina, so she's usher to a Kain.
What is she chayiv? She's a chorus?
Well, if we have Eidim and Hasra, she's Chayiv Misa. She's Chayiv Misa.
Oh boy.
I think Skila from Nesuin, Sreifa from Erison, I forget exactly, but something like that. So, Haniton al Ish. Let's say you have the same case. Now it's no longer Reuven with, I don't know, Rochelle. Now it's Reuven with Rachel. So she's a Jewish lady. She's married, right? And Shimon is a rumor on Shimon that he was mizana with her. We don't have proof, but this is what people are saying. And then what happened was the one she was married to, let's say Reuven divorced her, mitachas yado. She's no longer married to him. Afal pisha kanas. Then we say certainly don't marry her. Shimon's not allowed to marry her to confirm it. But here we say if he did, yotzi, he has to divorce her. Now here it seems on some level the confirmation of rumor is not enough. It's not the only thing going on here. The fact that she's an Eshes Ish, we have to figure out just exactly why he has to take. I mean, if it's all a rumor question, then what's the difference?
Why should we take? Why should we?
Right. Meaning, we said before that he could stay married to the guy after she's Nisgaira. If it's just about confirming the rumor, and here's confirming the rumor, you have no proof. You don't know for sure she was Mazana. It's just a rumor.
The worst rumor. It could lead to mamzerus.
So it's a problem not about her. It's a problem because let's say she has kids from the first husband. She has kids from the first husband. Now we have a problem, right? But so what we're going to see in the Gemara is that this halacha might only apply when she doesn't have kids. Meaning when she has kids from the first husband, in order to prevent those kids from getting a reputation as mamzerim, we'll say stick around. But if not, we'll say no. We have to work it out in the Gemara. But either way, says the Gemara. The implication over here is that this woman, when she's nisgaira, the gerus is a good gerus, even though there's a rumor that she was already having an affair with a Jewish man. Normally, we would say this is zelo kosher.
We don't want that one.
Zelo kosher, as my Iranian friends would say. Zelo kosher. Zelo kosher. This is not kosher. Yeah. You're telling me that this woman comes to a chashuv bezdin and says, "Hi, I want to become Jewish." They go through the whole process and they don't figure out that there's this Jewish guy that she's looking to get with. Obviously, the problem here in the gerus should be that it's a gerus that's not lishma. We know, generally speaking, we want geruses to be lishma. Says the Gemara, "Hagiyirus mi ahavya." It's mashma. You're right. We would tell him not to marry such a giyirus. But if she was megayer, the gerus is good. The Gemara, I got to steer. Echad ish. If a man tries to become a Goyish man tries to become Jewish in order to marry a woman, or the other way around, where a person wants to be Megayer because the Jews got a lot of money, or because he wants to be part of Avdei Shlomo, meaning a hush of thing, to be part of a king's home, a king's house. Nechemi tells us that this gerus is not good. Why is it not good? You'll notice there's no letter here. We don't paskin like this. Meaning, obviously, we want it to be lishma, but as long as the person does have good intent, and it's not very obvious that they're doing something, we don't know for sure. If they say, "Yeah, I'm only doing this for her," that's a different story. We're concluding his thought for him. We don't know. He's saying, "I want to be Jewish because I want to be Jewish." We got to believe him, right?
Nechemi seems to be saying, even if in another city a Basin was Megayer this person, and then you found out.
Okay, you're finding a more halachic scenario.
It seems he's being almost, even after the fact, he's saying Ein Gerus. He's not just saying Ein Megayer people like this.
It's a good hara. It's a good diak. It's a good diak. Yeah. Okay. Shiur Nechemi Aimer Echad Geirei, and it makes sense because the Mishnah is talking like that. The Mishnah is talking about a case where she was Megayer. Gemara is saying the Gerus was good. From Nechemi, you see, it's not a good gerus. Echad geirei arayis, ve'echad geirei chaloimus, ve'echad geirei Mordechai ve'Esther, ein and geirim. These are various different cases where people are doing gerus for other reasons. Geirei arayis is the story with the kusim. I think it's in Malachim, Aleph, Beis. Shayir Nechemi, ve'echad geirei chaloimus. Let's say you go to, I don't know, you're walking down Brighton Beach and some Russian lady tells you, "I see in your future that you're going to become Jewish." And you're like, "Oh, really? Okay." The lady said I should become Jewish. So if you're doing the gerus shalol lishma, dechad gerei Mordechai ve'Esther. You look at Rashi over here, quotes from Psukim. Where does it say it? Here. Rabbi me'amei aretz misyadim. You see, the pasuk says that many of the goyim at that time, when they saw how good it was to be a Jew after, right, napoichu, they all wanted to become Jews. So it says Reb Nechemia, "Achi is gairu bizman hazeh sakadaytchino ela ema kizman hazeh," meaning to say, we only accept geirim when the Jews are in their normal state of mind, which is when things aren't going good for the Jews. When we got pogroms, when we're like not important in a community. But if the Jews have it good, we don't accept geirim because maybe they're only doing it in order to, latch onto the Rothschilds. That doesn't work. So Gemara says, so what's the kasha? The kasha is our mission is mashma that the geirus is going to be good even if it's for alternative purposes, ulterior motives. So Gemara says, no, what do you mean? Ha'itmar Allah, Amr Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta Mishmei Derav. Halacha k'divrei Omer kulam geirim. We don't hold the Ver Nechemia, says the Gemara. We hold that the halacha is kulam geirim, and since they're also geirim, even though there is a problem of an ulterior motive, so too Reb Nechemia's halacha is not like that, and our Mishnah is fine. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then how come in our Mishnah we're saying not to marry such a woman? Meaning, if I thought the reason why you shouldn't marry her has something to do with not marrying a ger, and it's just a b'diavad we say if they married her. Says the Gemara, there's nothing to do with that. The gerus is 100% good. If the gerus is 100% good, then the chatchila you should marry her. Says the Gemara, mishum de Ravasi, dam Ravasi, and here's the pasuk that is ultimately the explanation for our Mishnah as to why you shouldn't marry a person who you have rumors with. Is, and again, the pasuk shot and the pasuk don't ask, but the simple read is like this: Haser mimcha akshus peh. V'lazos sefasayim, which is basically telling you don't substantiate rumors. Tanar Rabban, Brisa says as follows: Ein mekabim gerim limois Mashiach. We do not take gerim when Mashiach comes. Why? Because at that point it's too late. Mashiach's here, everything's going good for them. It's the same idea. We generally speaking try not to take gerim. It does not mean that if we take them that they're not good. However, we generally don't want to take gerim then because it's sort of like a little too late. Tyson has a bomb kasha over here. We know that Basparai was one of his wives. Basparai was clearly a ger. So Tyson has a beautiful answer. Tyson says, what's the whole svara why we don't accept gerim when it's during the Mei David, Mei Shloimeh, or Mei Moshe Mashiach? Because it's clearly good for the Jews, and we don't want the guy coming from his hobble to come. Okay, Basparai was living in a palace. Obviously, for her, she's not doing it for that reason. She has servants. Yeah. She's living a good life. So Tyson says, Pashup Shat. Shlomo was allowed. So again, so what that also means is that clearly what we're saying over here is we'll make exceptions. The Mordechai speaks this out as well. Obviously, we will make exceptions if someone, even in the times of David, Shlomo, and Mashiach, if the context allows us to conclude that they're doing it for sincere reasons. Amar Rebbe Eliezer, Mikra, what's shot in the pasuk for this? I'm sorry, where do you see this in the psukim? Pasuk says in Yeshaya, it says like this: Hein gar yagar efes mausi miger itcha alecha. I hope I read that right. Alecha yipol. Also, basically, what it's saying over here is Hengar Yagur Ephes Mausi. When God is hidden, when there's Ephes Mausi, when his Mitzias is seemingly Ephes, then Gar Yagur you can have a ger. Why? Because then the ger is coming into Yiddishkeit when it's as if Hashem is not treating us well. And the continuation of the pasuk is Miger Itcha Alecha Yipol. It's only the one who is the ger at that time with you. Yipol here Rashi speaks out that Yipol means that. Is going to be la'olam haba yipol. He'll also have a schus. He'll be a good Jew, and the gerus takes. Aval idechloi, but if it's someone who's insincere, not. So again, you have a back and forth here in the Gemara, and we're not passing any shilas here with gerus. Ideally, we want to have people that we only take in who are sincere. But even if they're slightly insincere, again, I think the halacha is if someone is clearly showing that the reason why they're doing this, like they say to the rabbi, I have no interest in this. I'm not planning on keeping any of the halachas. But you know what it is? My mother-in-law, she wears a chai, and it's important to her. That I'm pretty sure there's nothing. Whereas if it's a person who's saying, I want to become Jewish, I'm willing to become Jewish, I want to be Shemet Torah mitzvahs, yes, is the inciting incident, the triggering act, the triggering motivation, the fact that I want to marry this woman, okay, that's not ideal. But technically speaking, if you go through the motions and you are sincere in your desire to be a Jew, then it works. It's just that ideally we don't want to do it from those things because let's be honest, most people who are doing it from those reasons, if you're really Yorer L'Sov Daitam, the Pashta says they're not doing it for the right reasons. This is the Ivanka Trump question. This is Ivanka Trump clearly isn't doing it to go up in money, right?
There's a woman in my neighborhood who was from Poland, grew up Catholic, very anti-Jewish surroundings. She started searching. Her parents threw her out. She went to Israel. They wouldn't talk to her. I mean, they just said, we're not going to do it. Then she went to America and she found rabbis. Now she's converted. So, even today, there are different attitudes.
I find it so interesting that we're coming up in these sugis of gerus. It's very interesting stuff. Okay, we'll start just the next bit of Gemara. What time is it?
8:21.
Okay, so I have a couple of minutes. We'll go a little weiter here. We'll try to get to the bottom of the daf. Haniton al eishes. So what did it say in the Mishnah? It said in the Mishnah that you have a man. In Hebrew, we would say he's a chashud. He's a person who we have to be suspicious about him. That he,
What's it called?
And he chashud, like chashad means, you have to be suspicious. There's something to be concerned for. So he's a chashud. He's a person you have to. Meaning this is not the guy you want to leave alone with your wife in the house. Yeah, okay. This is a Haman in the house, like when Achashverosh comes back. A niton al eishes ish.
He's a ruwe.
A who?
Ruwe.
Is that an Tanakh?
Rouee.
Rouee. Is that an actual English word?
It's French.
French.
Okay. It's a common word, right?
Okay.
Ruwe.
You've heard this?
No.
No clue. Okay. Hanitan al ish. So then the Mishnah, the halacha is you're not allowed to marry a woman who there's a rumor about you and her after she gets divorced from her first husband. And not only that, if you married her, you got to divorce her. Ask the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, this whole Mishnah is talking about Eidim, which is a complete hipuch. It's a complete flip of what we understood. We've been learning this Mishnah is not talking about Eidim. Rav says it's Eidim. And the Amar of Sheshes, a classic line. I know it shows up in Masechta Baba Kama a couple times. Amina, I'm saying, Kinoyim v'shachev Rav. Rav must have been half asleep. Amar lahai shmaitza when he said that statement he just said. What he just said is so beyond the pale. There's no way he really meant it. He was half asleep when he said this. This Gemara actually shows up in Meruba, in the 7th paragraph of Baba Kama, by the Sugi of Shina Hashem. I remember it from many, many years ago. But either way, Amina Kinoyim v'shachev Rav Amar lahai shmaitza. Why? Meaning, why is he saying Rav Sheshes saying that Rav must have been sleeping when he said this? Because again, what Rav would then be saying is that the din of our Mishnah is talking where we're not talking about rumors anymore. We're not talking about Eidim. 2 Eidim saw this nus. So that means 2 Eidim saw this nus by the guy, by the Shivcha, and by the Eshes Ish. So says the Gemara, says Rav Sheshes, the Tanya. Now we're going to have a brisa that's going to supposed to be like a corollary brisa. It's like a similar brisa to our Mishnah. And we're going to see some interesting facts there that are going to be inconsistent with saying that our Mishnah and the brisa are talking about Eidim. Haniton al Eshes Ish. Basically the sefer of our Mishnah. So we'll give some names. I'm using the names that Rashi gives. Haniton Ruvain al Eshes Ish Dina. So Ruvain, there's a rumor around Ruvain that he was with Dina. And according to Rav, we're going to say there are Eidim about this, right? Al Yadai, and Shimon divorced Dina. Shimon was Dina's first husband, and he was divorced her. So now Dina's available. V'nizgarsha mitachas yedei acher, and she then married. We'll say Rashi uses for some reason Nachshon. She married Nachshon, and now Nachshon divorces her. So that means the rumor was between Reuven and Dina. But when Shimon divorced Dina, Dina didn't go be with Reuven. Dina went and married Nachshon. There was no rumor between Nachshon and Dina, and it was only after Nachshon now dies or divorces her that now the question is, what's the halacha? Can Reuven marry her or not? And it says over here he shouldn't. However, imkanas lo yotzi. If he did, then the halacha is he does not have to divorce her. Meaning, somehow having a marriage in between the marriage that she was in when the rumors went about and when Reuven would marry her, that marriage with Shimon in between, sorry, not Shimon, the marriage with Nachshon in between changes things. Now, again,
it's like a grace to the rumor.
Right, meaning, and again, you can see where the Gemara is going. The Gemara is going to say, this only helps if I don't know for sure what happened. And now the rumor becomes a lot weaker because if it's true, doesn't it make sense that Reuven, unless he's a real sneaky guy, where he's like, you know what, I'll let Nachshon take this. I'll continue the side hustle with Nachshon. We'll do it a little quieter so there's no rumors. I mean, that's what you'd have to assume is going on here. And so says the Gemara, hey chidami, Eidim, like you, Rav, we're talking here about there are Eidim in this brisa, then that means I know for sure Reuven was Mizana with Dina. That means Dina is an Eshes Ish. Then the halacha is she's also to be with Reuven for the rest of her life. Because Reuven is a boil. He's the one that we said earlier she's not allowed to be with. So ki asa acher ve'afsike lekala, when you have this middle marriage coming in and stopping the rumor or weakening the rumor, my have it doesn't help. In the end of the day, he's always aser. Reuven and Dina are always going to be aser. El alav deleka edim. It must be talking about, like we've explained, there's no edim, and that's pshat in our Mishnah also. But Taiman, what's the reason? Is the asa acher ve'afsike lekala? It's because you had a marriage in between, which weakens the likelihood that the rumor's true. Halav hachi, but if you didn't have that, mafkina, then the halacha is you take it out. Not like you, Rav, that says it's only true when you're having edim. Says the Gemara, Amar Lacha Rav, no. Who adin the afal gav deloy osa acher ve'afsika lekala, that the halacha is ika edim mafkina and ilaka edim lay mafkin. He says that when it comes to the rumor, if you have edim, then we're going to be motzi them. If you don't have edim, we're not going to be motzi. Whether there is a hefsek in between or not. The hachi kamar, and this is the way to read the brisa and ultimately the Mishnah. The afal gav the osa acher ve'afseke lekala lechatchila lo yichnos, but b'diavad you don't have to divorce. Why? Because again, if you don't have edim, you don't have to divorce. Rav is basically saying, my understanding is, when you have edim about the znus, not only can you not marry her, but you must divorce her. If you don't have edim, then a rumor is going to tell you don't marry her. but only don't marry her if there's no hefsek. If there's a hefsek, then you can even marry her lechatchila because the hefsek takes that away. But Einachanami, the Mishnah is talking about Edom. So Mor says, I have a different brisa. Meisvei, Bamedvaram Amurim, our Mishnah, Bamedvaram Amurim, the brisa, that you must divorce when you marry a woman who there was a rumor about you. And again, according to Rashi, according to Rav, this is talking about, of course, where there was Edom. And according to Rav Sheshetz, it's not. So Bamedvaram Amurim, Kisha Ein Labanim. The din is only true that we divorce you from the woman that we're suspicious about you with is only when she, from the first husband, has no children. So in this case, Dinah has no children with Shimon. So there's no one really affected by us telling you to divorce her. Because by divorcing her, all we're really saying is the two of you did something wrong. Well, that's your problem. But since there are no kids, we're not hurting anyone by telling you. But what are we doing if she does have kids? Now, let's assume for a second there's no Edom. That means we don't know for sure the Mamzerim. So what are we really doing by forcing Ruvain to divorce Dinah? We're basically saying Ruvain must have been Mizana with Dinah, which means Dinah's children from Shimon are Mamzerim. In which case then the halacha is lo seitze, in order so that people will not think those kids are Mamzerim. However, continues the Brisa, the imbo Eidei Tuma, if you have actual Edom saying that Ruvain was Mizana with Dinah, then afilu yesh la kama banim. She could have 1,000 kids. We're not concerned about some derabanan svara of being motzi laz on these kids, because if we have Edom, it's very possible they are mamzerim, and for sure Reuven can't be with her. Then of course the halacha is teitze. So what's the kasha? You see clearly from this brisa, Edom in, lo Edom lo. You couldn't be more explicit. Says Gemara, no. Rav mukilo lamasnisim b'yesh labanim. Our Mishnah says Rav, that brisa and our Mishnah work. That brisa is exactly what Rav is saying. Our Mishnah is talking about a case where there are Edom, and so therefore, since there are Edom, you're mitzi. Whereas when and why do I need to do that? Because our Mishnah is also talking about v'yesh labanim. Sorry, I read that backwards. Rav mukilo lamasnisim b'yesh labanim. That Dinah had kids from the first marriage. In which case, then the halacha would be that without Edom, we would not be motzi if it's a rumor. So therefore, it has to be talking about where there are Edom to establish that that's the reason why you're motzi. Which means, really, Rav is sort of like contorting himself here. Really, he could have accomplished the Mishnah without Edom and without children. And instead, he's having it where there were children so that we wouldn't have been making him get a divorce because of rumors. And therefore, he's got to say there are Edom to say that's why we get a divorce. For the Gemara, in which case then v'yesh la'edem, and why did you do that, Rav? It's such a dochuk. Look, just make it simple. There's no kids in the Mishnah, like Rav Sheshes would say. In which case, then afagav deleka edem, the halacha is going to be your motzi. Why? Because we're concerned for the mamzer. We're not concerned.
I says you only have to do with Edom.
Exactly. The Gemara, Rav is saying, he's establishing the Mishnah with Edom because he understands that the Mishnah is talking about where you have kids, but and the brisa that was brought is consistent with the Mishnah because the brisa is talking about you're only motzi when there are no kids, and you're only and Rav agrees to that. You're only motzi when there are no kids, but when there are kids, you're not motzi. And the reason why the Mishnah has to be is only because of Edom. But really, Rav Sheshes doesn't have to do that. Rav Sheshes could just say our Mishnah is talking about when there's no kids, and simple. And Rav would agree to that. Why doesn't Rav do that? It's much more simple, right? Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. So Amarava, no. The reason why Rav felt compelled to say that our Mishnah is talking about Edom, in which case then it must be talking about where if there are Edom, it's got to be talking about where there are kids. Amarav, because you don't need kids if there's no Edom. It's only because if you have no kids in the Mishnah, then the halacha is your motzi. Even Rav would agree. It's just that if you have kids, now you need Edom in order to be motzi. He had a problem in the Mishnah itself. Read the Mishnah. The grammar question. When we read the Mishnah, what does it say? That when a man who is nitan al eshes ish marries her, the hotziuha mitachas yado, and now they made her get divorced. That language, v'hotziuha, and they removed her. Who's they? Listni haitzia. Why not say she got divorced or he divorced her? What's the hotziuha? They separated them. Ella kol hotziuha bebezdin. Obviously, we're talking about Bezdin was motzi them, which means Bezdin be'edom udemafki. Bezdin are only doing that with Edom. So therefore, Rav says it's not the pshat that I'm compelled in the Mishnah to say Edom because of some cheshbon and lumdus. It's read the Mishnah. The Mishnah is clearly talking about a case of Edom. If the Mishnah is talking about a case of Edom, so really Rav could say to Rav Sheshes, Kinoyim v'shachar v'sheishis ta'amar lach shmeitza. Did you read the Mishnah? Well, you weren't reading the Mishnah. The Mishnah is very clear. The Mishnah is talking about Edom. The Mishnah is talking about Edom, and that's the reason why you're mitzi. Then clearly we're talking about a case in the Mishnah where there are kids. Because if there wouldn't be kids, you wouldn't need to be talking about Edom. That's how Rav would respond. There's an Ibay same here, but it takes us into the Gemara tomorrow, which is going to be continuing with this all the way to the Mishnah. So I think here's a good spot. I mean, we're mamish in the middle, but it's